It's Saturday, August 22nd, 2026. You're listening to the DX Today AI Daily Brief. Today, Apple cuts more than 200 jobs as it redirects toward AI and new devices. Anthropic recruits one of Google's most senior chip engineers. And Dutch regulators hand Uber an €825 million privacy fine over automated decisions about its drivers. Let's get into it.
Apple has cut more than 200 positions across its Siri, Vision Pro, and Intelligent Systems Experience teams. Bloomberg first reported the reductions on Friday. The cuts fall hardest on immersive video staff and a Vision Pro gaming group that was largely eliminated. Apple frames the move as a redirection of resources toward AI and a new generation of devices rather than a retrenchment. It follows a smaller round earlier in the week affecting roughly 60 Vision Products employees. For a company that has spent 2 years defending the pace of its AI work, the message is pointed. The headcount is not leaving Apple so much as being moved away from the mixed reality bet and toward the assistant and the hardware Apple believes comes next.
Staying with the talent race.
Anthropic has hired Amir Salek, one of the most senior custom silicon engineers Google has produced. Bloomberg reported Friday that Salek joins Anthropic's compute team. At Google, he led work on the Tensor Processing Unit program and helped deliver its first 7 generations, the chips that let Google train frontier models without relying entirely on outside suppliers. Anthropic has not issued a press release, and the company has not committed publicly to building its own accelerator. But hiring a person with that resume is not a neutral act. It signals that a lab currently spending heavily on rented compute is at least studying what it would take to own the silicon underneath it.
Now to AI infrastructure.
NVIDIA is taking a minority stake in Cloverleaf Infrastructure, a United States developer that assembles the land, power, and cooling that data centers sit on. Cloverleaf announced the strategic partnership Friday. Neither company disclosed financial terms, though the Wall Street Journal reported the investment runs to hundreds of millions of dollars. The logic is straightforward. NVIDIA sells accelerators that are useless, without electricity and a building to hold them, and grid interconnection queues have become the binding constraint on AI capacity in North America. By putting capital into the developers who secure that power years in advance, NVIDIA is buying insurance on demand for its own hardware and moving further up a supply chain it does not otherwise control.
From the ground to orbit.
StarCloud has raised $250 million in a Series A extension that values the company at $2.3 billion post-money. Manhattan West led the round, with NVIDIA participating. The company is building data centers in orbit, where sunlight is constant and the vacuum handles cooling that would otherwise require water and power on the ground. It is an unproven proposition. Launch costs, radiation hardening, and servicing a rack 300 miles up are all unsolved at commercial scale. What the round reflects is how sharply the constraint has shifted. When terrestrial capacity is limited by grid connections and local opposition, investors will underwrite ideas that would have looked exotic 2 years ago.
The capital markets next.
Nscale, the AI cloud company, is preparing a United States listing that could raise as much as $3 billion. Bloomberg reported the plan Friday, describing it as preliminary, with the timing and the size both subject to change. Nscale rents out graphics processing capacity to companies training and serving large models, a business that barely existed at scale 3 years ago and now attracts sovereign wealth and infrastructure money. A listing of that size would give public investors a relatively pure exposure to AI compute demand without the diversified revenue that cushions the hyperscalers. It would also be a test of whether public markets will finance the build-out at the valuations private markets have been setting.
To Seoul and semiconductors.
Samsung Electronics has announced the largest shareholder return in Korean corporate history. The company estimates the package at 90 to 110 trillion won, roughly $65 to $80 billion, spread across dividends and buybacks. Samsung presents it as an estimate rather than a finalized payout, and its own announcement does not tie the figure specifically to artificial intelligence. The context is hard to miss, though. High bandwidth memory for AI accelerators has transformed the economics of Samsung's chip division, and the company is now generating cash faster than it can deploy it into capacity. Returning that much capital to shareholders is a statement about confidence and about how durable Samsung believes this demand cycle to be.
Turning to model releases.
DeepSeek has released an experimental multimodal model called V4 Flash Vision Experimental, available through its application programming interface. The model processes text and images together, and DeepSeek published it through its official API changelog rather than a formal launch event. Early coverage positions it against Anthropic's Opus line. The release lands while DeepSeek is reportedly preparing a mainland China listing, which gives the timing a certain logic. The Chinese lab built its reputation on delivering competitive capability at a fraction for the training spend, its Western rivals report, and extending that claim from text into vision is the natural next argument. Whether the benchmark results hold up under independent testing is the open question.
Regulators in Europe. Next.
The Dutch Data Protection Authority has fined Uber €825 million for violating European privacy law in how it handled driver accounts. Regulators found that Uber suspended and deactivated drivers through automated decision-making without adequate human review or proper notification, covering practices from roughly 2018 through 2022. Uber says it will appeal. The size of the penalty is notable, but the reasoning matters more. Europe's privacy regime gives people a right not to be subject to consequential decisions made purely by algorithm, and this ruling treats losing access to your livelihood as exactly that kind of decision. Every platform that manages workers through software now has a number attached to getting it wrong.
Now, a courtroom in Connecticut.
A Connecticut streamer named Warren Pandiskia has filed a proposed class action against Twitch and its parent company, Amazon, alleging they used streamers' broadcasts to train generative AI models without permission or compensation. The complaint was filed Thursday and reported Friday. It is one streamer seeking to represent a class, not a group action already certified, and the legal questions are genuinely unsettled. Streamers agree to sweeping terms of service when they publish on the platform, and how far those terms stretch to cover model training has not been tested. What is clear is that the fight over training data has moved past books and images into the live video libraries that platforms already hold.
To China's robotics sector.
Dexmall, a Chinese robotics startup backed by Alibaba, is seeking a valuation of around 20 billion yuan, roughly $3 billion, in an ongoing funding round. Bloomberg reported the talks Friday, noting the round is not closed and the target could move. Dexmall works on what the industry calls physical AI, the effort to give robots the general-purpose reasoning that language models brought to text. Chinese investors have moved aggressively into the category this year, and valuations have climbed well ahead of commercial deployment. The bet is that whichever company solves general manipulation first captures a market the size of manufacturing itself. The counter-argument is that nobody has solved it yet.
Back to the United States.
A federal court in Billings, Montana heard arguments Friday over the state's law regulating AI-generated content in election communications. The statute requires disclosure on synthetic media and political messaging within 60 days of an election. It does not ban such content outright. The challenge argues the disclosure mandate sweeps in protected political satire. Montana is one of roughly 24 states that passed deepfake election rules ahead of this cycle, and this is among the first to reach substantive federal review. However the judge rules, the decision will shape how far states can go in policing synthetic political speech, a question Congress has so far declined to answer.
And finally, from Australia.
And in Australia, a compensation tribunal has priced AI-driven job disruption into an injury payout for what appears to be the first time. The New South Wales Personal Injury Commission assessed roughly $950,000 for Andrew Duong, injured in a motor vehicle accident, including about $400,000 for future economic loss. In calculating what he would have earned over a working life, The Commission factored in how much artificial intelligence might reduce demand for his occupation. It is a narrow, personal injury ruling, not employment law, but it puts a number on a question every actuary and every tribunal will eventually face.
That's your briefing for Saturday, August 22nd, 2026. For DX Today, stay curious.